Hello?
Ah, it works.
I'm not sure. I've got too many. I'll stand off to the side so we don't get. All right, thanks everybody. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Erik Lindholm. Erik Lindholm, who's an alumnus here of UBC, got his master's degree here. I first met Erik about 20 years ago when I was at NVIDIA, and what I remember was I was working on a part of the chip that was slowing it down, and then Erik, who was sort of the mastermind of the thing, had to come and talk to the people on my team and figure out what we were doing to mess up his chip.
What group were you in at the time?
Frame buffer.
Ah, Rob.
Okay, so more formally, I'll go through his bio here. So Erik joined NVIDIA in Q3 1997. He architected the transform and lighting units of the NV1X GeForce 256, as the rest of the world knows it, as well as the first Vertex shader unit in the NV2X family. He also designed the pixel shader instruction set for the NV3X programmable pixel shader hardware. He was the lead architect of the G80, or NV50 as we called it, GeForce 8800, as the rest of the world knows it, streaming multiprocessor, and has been working on unified processors and queuing systems ever since. Prior to that, he spent 8 years at Silicon Graphics, where he worked on the VG-XT Reality Engine and Infinite Reality. Prior, he spent 3 years in Osaka, Japan, where he worked on car navigation display, 3D graphic pipeline software, ray tracing, and within NVIDIA, Erik is legendary for how many patents he has. He has 128 US patents, and as I said, he got his master's degree here in electrical engineering, and he's gotten the Dean's Medal of Distinction, and he holds titles of NVIDIA Senior Distinguished Architect and NVIDIA Master Inventor. So please welcome me in join me in welcoming Erik. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you. I'm going to start with an old video because I don't want to interrupt my talk in the middle and get confused by all this. When I joined Silicon Graphics in 1990, this was the state-of-the-art, best graphics you could buy at any price. So I want you to see what it looked like 35 or 34 years ago. State-of-the-art computer graphics, hundreds of thousands of dollar systems, computers. We don't know where the audio is, but I think you'll get the point anyway. As you will notice, your cell phones are way better than this today for a much lower price. These are simulations done usually for government or military industry, looking at battleships, airplanes, war practice. As you can see, tank simulations. It's primitive. All right. Full screen mode. So my abstract. So I will be mostly reading off my slides. They're my thoughts. I will ad-lib a little bit as we go. But, and there's some pictures I will explain, but it'll come and go back and forth. So, and if you have questions, I'm going to put Tor in charge of routing questions to me, so take his attention. I may not be paying attention to you. I want to thank Tor and Dean James for inviting me here today. Dean James was proposing I give this talk back in the summer, and for some strange reason, Tor sent me an email a few months later saying I should give a talk. And since I would be in Vancouver in November, here we are. So, successful career, we all want that, is the desired result of many decisions you will find most out of your control, dealing with being the right person, at the right place, at the right time. And you have some control over this, but not a lot. Tor just talked about that. Disclaimer, this is necessary for me. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of my own and do not represent those of NVIDIA. General comment about my career: I love to solve problems. I have never desired to become a manager. I feel I would be very poor at it. As a result, I have stayed on the technical track my whole career, and I am very, very happy staying on the technical track. Your mileage may vary. Some of you may want to be in management, and some of you may want to be on the technical side. This is my journey, very briefly summarized. I was born in Sweden, moved to Vancouver, grew up in Cornell, which happens to be about 8 hours north of here, just south of Prince George. Came back here for UBC for many years, and then worked in Osaka, Japan for a couple of years, and then from there on to Silicon Valley, in California, the Holy Grail, the best place to be in the world. A bit of very simplistic background. My father was a dentist in Sweden, and we emigrated here in 1971. I was a young child. We spent a year in Vancouver while he earned his Canadian dental credentials, and then we moved to Cornell. I graduated 78. I was an excellent math student, and I loved doing math competitions back in those days. My friends and I, of which we have actually one in the audience from high school, and my sister and my brother are here as well, sitting over there. We all came from business families, and it was expected that we go to university. It was never in question. We never had to think about it. I had good grades. It was easy getting in back in those days. I gather that's no longer true. You actually have to study now to get into engineering. It was easy back then. I only applied at one university. I got accepted. I took first-year science, obviously. I loved math. I liked physics. But I wasn't sure what to do after that. Back in those days, by the way, engineering was different from science, and I'll get to that in a second briefly. I was back home for a summer job, working in a lumber mill, talking to my metalwork teacher, a legacy of my father. He was a real handyman, and I grew up with that. And he suggested I go into engineering. He himself was a dropout, it turned out, from electrical when he was younger. And he was right. I should have thought about this myself. I was good at math. I liked electronics. Engineering was a 5-year program. First year science, then first year engineering, and then 3 years of your specialty, of which I picked electrical. It was too long. You don't want to spend 5 years for your undergraduate degree. But I graduated in '83, time to start my career. Unfortunately, '83 was a poor year to graduate in. As the title says, 83 college grads facing bleakest job market in 2 decades. Many interviews, no job offers. I had let my grades slip. 5 years is a long time, especially after high school. I played lots of foosball. I love playing foosball. And I was tired of being in school. But between being unemployed and waiting for a job, I applied for grad studies. I was accepted. Here's my old UBC foosball tourney champs jacket from those days. I love playing foosball. I have my own table at home, even today. In the spring of '86, I was finishing my thesis and started looking around for a job. I found nothing interesting in BC. However, there were a group of Japanese students on basically spring break from Japan, visiting in the spring, spent some time chatting with them. I loved Japanese culture, I loved Japanese anime, and I still do to this day. I still watch a lot of anime. Plus, it keeps my Japanese up a little bit. It gives me a chance to practice. This is me in my thesis defense back in 1986. I look about the same, I think. So, unemployment again facing me. I decided that I would go to Japan. I contacted a professor in Japan, one of the students' professors who came to visit, and with some assistance from UBC professors, I managed to convince them I was serious about this endeavor. In Japan, your teachers, your sensei, if you like, would place students with private companies, his graduates, so he had connections. He asked around, and Sumitomo Denko showed interest. It was proposed that I become a visiting researcher And this is because I had a master's degree. This would not have been possible with a bachelor's. Showed interest, and I spent time at the university as well as Sumitomo. I actually worked 6 days a week in Japan for a long time. They were interested in letting their engineers get more comfortable with foreigners. So, enter me. Now, the good thing about this is that I was working with engineers. This was not an English teaching job. I was actually doing real engineering work in Japan, which is extremely, extremely difficult to actually accomplish at the time. Expo 86 was the event of 1986 in Vancouver. Only a few of you, I suspect, remember those days. Falls Creek was razed to the ground, actually, to build the expo site, which is now Yale Town and that wonderful area of Vancouver. It used to be a rail yard, an industrial wasteland, if you can believe that. It looks a bit better today. Sumitomo had an exhibit at the expo site, and one of their senior executives was in town. I got the interview. They had to check me out personally. And I was given a job offer. And I had to wait for the visa. In the meantime, I took Japanese lessons. So I took first year university Japanese that summer. Gave me a start to the language. It's not really enough to be useful, but every bit helps. I took a loan for that because I had no money. The visa arrived. My parents took my stuff. I was off to Osaka. I got the cheapest fare I could find, Korean Airlines. It took me 32 hours to get to Osaka. Vancouver, to Los Angeles, to Anchorage, to Seoul, Korea, to Osaka. I would be on my own. I had a 2-year agreement to work in Japan. I knew nobody in Japan. So we're in Japan. I arrived in Osaka, nice place, met my Dr. Akiyama sensei, and quickly realized that it was incredibly hot and humid in September in Osaka. Think Dallas, Texas or something, 100% humidity, steam hot. He hosted me. I moved into the company dormitory after that because that was the cheapest way to live. My pay was low, but the dorm had subsidized room and board. I spent 1.5 years in this dormitory. I took the train to work, 75 minutes one way. I thought it was a miserable existence. But these days, that's probably a pretty short commute for people to go to work, especially in Vancouver. The dormitory had steam heating, and it was only on between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. at night. So in the winters, you would wake up to 0 temperatures, i.e. Celsius, freezing. Have to go down 3 flights of stairs. It was not particularly pleasant. My initial work, car navigation software. They had a map database, vehicles with wheel rotation tracking and compass. This is before GPS was functionally useful. And this was the Dotai Joho Shishitenbu group at Sumitomo. Here I am, wearing the corporate uniform. Had a cap, shirt, pants, boots. That was the uniform. So this is a photo shoot they did for a promotional brochure about the company. And being a gaijin, a foreigner, they of course had to put me into this promotional picture. There, of course, were cultural mismatches. I had an HP, Hewlett-Packard programming station, on the factory floor, which was not a good place to work. And on the factory floor, you had to wear cap, uniform, and safety boots, because software is very dangerous work. And of course, I would kick off my boots, take off my cap, lean back, and type. Unfortunately, they were regular safety inspections, and I flunked. I was talked to somewhat sternly, and we came to a compromise. They would warn me before the inspectors showed up. I would put on my boots and my cap, look good while they walked by with their little notes and everything. The moment they left, off came the boots and the cap, and I went back to real work. Bureaucracy is somewhat sad in many cases. In '88, I moved to the research, the Kenkyu Kaihatsu group, and in there I learned to program a graphics pipeline in software. They wanted to develop a graphics workstation, and they needed software paths to follow. I also renegotiated my contract. which allowed me to move to apartment for the last year in Japan. And life got a lot better because I was about 15, 20 minutes from work now. So my commute was way better. Plus, I could walk from downtown Shinsaibashi in Osaka, so I could drink as much as I wanted and stagger home in an hour, because the trains stop early in Japan. There is no 3 a.m. trains possible, and taxis were abysmal. I also spent time at the university studying ray tracing. I loved graphics even back then. I played video games since high school, late 70s. I used to have a Fairchild F8 programmable video game system a long time ago. This is an article I submitted to the Fourth Software Conference in '87, and they liked my little pictures enough to put me on the front page. So I still have these proceedings as a souvenir. You'll see my name down here with a whole bunch of Japanese. Osaka Denkitsu Shindaigaku Akiyama Laboratory, which I don't know exactly what the Japanese pronunciation is. In April '89, my contract almost expired. I decided to go back to more familiar territory, North America. I had learned a fair amount of Japanese. I had studied really hard. I continually took courses. I could think in Japanese, which took me 2 years to learn, so I could actually understand a reasonable amount of Japanese. It was a nice country. I liked it, but I was tired of being a guest the whole time, a visiting guest. And honestly, it was quite lonely. Again, I didn't know much of anybody there. Shipped out my resume, as one would normally expect, crossed my fingers, flew to Los Angeles where I had a friend. So I crashed there for 2 weeks doing interviewing. Top of my list, Silicon Graphics. They were famous even at this point in time for the best computer graphics workstations in the business. They had actually been at UBC in '84 during my grad student days, and I actually had attended a sales pitch by them. And I still have the marketing materials from that meeting in my records. So we're up to May '89 in LA. Still no word from Silicon Graphics. Black hole. Not a peep out of them. I was almost out of time. I had to move on. I called the manager up on the job posting, explained that I had applied. I heard nothing back. I was in LA for a few more days. Please give me an interview. And he granted me a phone interview on the spot. And at the end, he said, okay, we'll fly you up tomorrow. So I came up for a full interview day, and it went well. At the end of the interview day, the same afternoon, I was sitting in the lounge waiting for the taxi to take me back to the airport. They came in and said, we're going to make you an offer. It'll take a few days. And I'm going, yes. This is the actual job posting from 1988 that my friend forwarded to me at the time. And it says, I have a position open in a team responsible for graphics system software and microcode for a family of super high-performance graphics workstations. What I really wanted to see, a real job at last, my first real job. I was 29. As it says, dear Erik, confirming recent discussions, we are pleased to offer you employment with Silicon Graphics. Also in my archives. I started work in July '89 because I had to get a visa. I am Canadian. Totally broke again. Story of my life. They housed me for the first month, got an apartment. I bought a bicycle because I couldn't afford a car. I biked to work until December, which is something like Vancouver biking in maybe November, October. It started to rain. I've been saving money for a car, went to apply, but couldn't get a loan, no credit history. I came from Canada, I worked in Japan, I had no credit card, no nothing. My director, fortunately, heard my complaints, called the bank, convinced them otherwise, and life was better. Having been working in Japan for almost 3 years, it took me a bit, honestly, to learn how to work properly in Silicon Valley. I came from a somewhat dysfunctional, old-style Japanese company, and I went into this absolutely wonderful, high-tech company with the smartest people in the world, as far as I was concerned. Silicon Graphics built graphics workstations. The company was formed in 1981 by Jim Clark, a Stanford professor, I believe, and his graduate students. Jim Clark designed the first geometry engine, which is what I've been working on most of my career. It's a specialized floating point processor. Do you guys know what floating point is? Next week. All right. And a workstation was a computing platform powerful enough to do serious things. PCs back in the late 80s, or even early 80s, were really toys compared to what you needed to do a real job. So what is the graphics pipeline? It's basically a way to draw things. It works in triangles, normally, and you define triangles by vertices. You have a triangle, vertex 1, 2, and 3. You want to rotate it, scale it, transform it, put it onto your screen, and fill it full of pixels with hopefully pretty colors. So my contribution, does this mouse show up? It does, good. So I've lived in this block, vertex shader / TNL, transform and lighting. This has been my area of focus my whole career, basically. And it's a very good place to be, it turns out. I presume some of you have done graphics. True? No? False? At least one person says yes. That's good enough. So here is the Advanced Systems Division, February 1990. Smartest graphics people on the planet. And I still honestly work with some of these people at NVIDIA after 34 years. You can see me up here in the corner. These are incredibly talented people that did incredibly important work. And some of these people have been in the field their whole careers, just like I have. My first job at SGI, believe it or not, was porting a testing suite. I had to learn the ropes. I wasn't particularly happy about the idea, but I'm not going to argue about it. It's a great job. So this was porting a RSGL testing suite into OpenGL. It was an updated API for graphics. And the initial GL release was June 92, and I was helping testing of the hardware to make sure we were conformant with our own spec. And over my career, this is very important, wake up, I have learned the importance of properly testing one's work. Never, ever assume somebody else will find your mistakes. It's embarrassing and wrong. Be responsible for your own stuff. Now, properly speaking, you should test your own work, and then somebody else who doesn't know you should test your work as well. There is nothing worse than making two mistakes of the same kind, so your tests and your work are both equally wrong. That is not going to make your company happy. And this was actually very important for my future, and I'll get back to this a bit later. Do not look down on testing. It's a great way to learn what's going on around you. It gives you a good overview. I did some microcoding. This was a very customized architecture on the raster side. Tor might know something about that kind of programming. The reality engine, code name was Venice. We always have code names for everything. Venice was the reality engine. 1 million polygons per second, not a big deal today, but at the time it was fabulous. And this was an Intel i860 microprocessor, designed by Intel, obviously. That was the geometry engine. So I programmed that part of the graphics pipeline on the Intel chip. And I learned a lot about transformer lighting microcoding, as well as primitive setup, what the stage that comes after the geometry engine. This is educational stuff. This is the board set of the reality engine. The top left board here is the transformer lighting geometry board, and that's all it does. And I've been told by somebody that there's about $2,000 worth of parts on this board. It was not cheap. The middle board is raster. It draws the pixels on your screen. And the third board here is for display, the video output. And they would go into this thing, this little enclosure, about half the size of a fridge. That's a workstation, the Onyx workstation. And I have a lot of t-shirts, probably about 100 of them accumulated over my career. They commemorate all the projects, or a lot of the projects I have worked on. And they're good souvenirs. This is the reality engine. Real cool, real fast, reality engine. I got married in 1993 to my wonderful wife, Judy. We met because of the testing suite. Judy, would you please stand up? So don't look down on testing. Classic Silicon Graphics t-shirt. Attitude inside. Now, if you remember the old Intel inside logo, this was a joke on that, and Intel, I hear, was not amused. I think their lawyers got a hold of us. Next up, the Infinite Reality, codenamed Kona, shipped early '96, getting close to the good stuff here. I helped with the instruction set of the geometry engine, and it had a very, very wide instruction word. I don't know if you've gotten to that kind of stuff yet, instruction words for CPUs. You'll probably get there. And it did a lot. I did a lot of lighting, transformer lighting work on this chip. It ran 90 megahertz, peak perf for 540 megaflops. That's a joke today. But at the time, it was really good. Maximum triangle rate, 11 million per second. This is a 6-inch wafer. You can see the small die inside. They're chopped up and encapsulated for the chips that you plug into the boards. So it's a little souvenir. This is Infinite Reality geometry board, I believe. Another big honking monster. The Kona Joes, it says over 10 million polys served every second. Another little souvenir. The jacket, you get all this cool swag when you work for a good company. And this is the Infinite Reality team back in 1996, SIGGRAPH in New Orleans. Again, extremely intelligent, smart, hardworking people. And we all built the fastest graphics in the world at the time. It was just really expensive graphics. Working at Silicon Graphics was great. Camaraderie ran high, beer bus Fridays, all the stuff you hear about Silicon Valley. Work-life balance kind of existed. It wasn't too bad. There were really busy times during bring up, because when you get those chips back from the fab, you want to make sure they work as quickly as you can in case you find a mistake. I remember rotating hours for a long time. I would work till I dropped, get up, have something to eat, go back to work till I dropped, and just rotate this 24-hour cycle. Every day, a few hours later, I got up. Did not make the team happy with me, but I got a lot of stuff done. I wrote a cool demo back then, solar system demo. It was really fun. And I got this 1991 demo competition, Snazziest Demo Award, because I loved doing graphics, and here I had the best workstations in the world for graphics. Code something up and enjoy it. The coolest time, Jurassic Park. I'm sure you've all seen the movie, the original Jurassic Park. From a press release, June 19th, director Steven Spielberg's film Jurassic Park marks the first time 3D graphics are an integral part of a major motion picture. This goes back also to the time of Terminator 2, the liquid metal Terminator. This was the new thing. They're going from models, from animation, like mechanical animation of special effects, to using computer graphics for special effects. Of course, today, you don't think twice about this. It's expected. And this is another t-shirt from the Jurassic Park celebration. This is an interview with Kurt Akeley, who is one of the founders of Silicon Graphics, one of Jim Clark's grad students. And the important parts of this are that the business decision was to go for high margin, provide high service, and don't worry too much about volume. SGI, Silicon Graphics, wanted high margin, expensive products with lots of profit, and it didn't matter if they only sold in the thousands. And as Kurt says here, the history of computing just says to me, if you don't go after volume, if you don't sell millions of GPUs, if you don't sell hundreds of millions of PCs, if you don't sell billions of phones, whatever it's going to be, you're going to be on the losing end of history. And this is what happened to SGI. As he says on the bottom paragraph, dramatic way, when SGI, it didn't quite explode, but you know, if you played it, filmed it in slow motion and played it back, it would look really stable. I worked there for 8 years. Nobody left. It was a great place to work. And then all of a sudden, blam! All of these great people we were talking about earlier scattered out, and they're all over the place. And of course, an important chunk went to NVIDIA. I will be part of that chunk. Important chunk went to ATI, and ATI was a Canadian company that was acquired by AMD back in 2006, and they had a rich history of computer graphics for PCs back in those days. And an important chunk went to Microsoft. Silicon Graphics was delisted from NYSE in 2005 and went bankrupt in 2006. Now, why is that? We're going to find out. The smart engineers realized that the PC, personal computer, was catching up to the expensive workstations. Intel had the Pentium, floating-point performance was increasing. SGI responded by buying Cray Research, a supercomputer maker, and did not want to compete in the commodity PC space. Losing confidence in management, we left. There was no future here. We knew it. I interviewed Q3 97 at NVIDIA, a company called Rendition, and I think Racer Graphics. Why? Well, so at NVIDIA, I had some friends. They had just left a month or two before me, and this is one of those career advice things. If you know smart people, then they leave, find out why and where they've gone. You might be happy later by following them. They may know something that you don't. In this case, one of them was an old friend of the CTO of NVIDIA. The other one was an old friend of the chief scientist of NVIDIA. They had the inside track. Again, the other companies were more CPU. They were more software-based graphics. And I learned hardware-based graphics at SGI, programming it at least. And NVIDIA wanted to do hardware, performance above all else. So I got offers from a couple. I picked NVIDIA. It was an easy choice. Rendition was later acquired by Micron and Racer by Apple. They failed. What I didn't quite realize was that there was a lot of competition out there. This is off the wiki, as it says at the bottom, list of defunct graphics, chips, and card companies. So this was the competition that I was getting myself involved in. This was a bit of a shock, but a bit of a challenge as well. So we're up to NVIDIA. So I don't know how much you know about NVIDIA. I thought I would this is not my talk to give, but I will give some background on the company I joined, just so you understand what was going on. It was started in 1993 by Jensen Huang, who I'm sure you've all heard about today, or now at least, Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem. Huang suggested the name NVIDIA from invidia, the Latin word for envy. It was one of 70 companies chasing this market. Only 2 survived, NVIDIA and ATI Technologies. And ATI, again, was acquired by AMD in 2006. NVIDIA's first graphics accelerator product, the NV1, was optimized for processing in quads, 4-sided figures instead of triangles, 3-sided figures. And when Microsoft demanded standards or mandated standards, they were not going to be friendly towards this chip. It failed. It had no market. NVIDIA also signed a contract with Sega to build a graphics chip for the Dreamcast. Now, some of you may know the Dreamcast. It's a 90s video game console. And worked on the project for a year. But NVIDIA was going down the wrong track, wrong technology, and it had a painful dilemma: keep working on a product with no future, or give up on it and run out of money, because I suspect Sega was paying the paychecks at this point in time. Eventually, Sega's president, Shoichiro Iremajiri, came to Huang to deliver the news that Sega was not going to use the NVIDIA chip for their Dreamcast. However, they struck a deal where Jensen managed to borrow $5 million from Sega. Don't know how he did that. But as he says, years later, Huang explained that this was all the money NVIDIA had left at the time. And his understanding and generosity gave us 6 months to live. NVIDIA is on the brink of joining that huge list of failed graphics companies. In '96, Huang laid off more than half of NVIDIA's employees, then around 100, and focused the company's remaining resources on developing a graphics accelerator product optimized for doing triangles, the Riva 128. By the time it was released in August '97, and I joined September '97, a month after this, NVIDIA was down to about 40 employees and only had enough money left for about 1 month of payroll. This is the fun part of joining startups. You'll discover if you ever do it, on the edge of going out of business. This sense of extreme desperation around NVIDIA during this difficult era and its early history gave rise to the unofficial company motto. And I was told this all the time as an employee when I joined. Our company is 30 days from going out of business. And this was Jensen's way of telling us to focus, get our jobs done, and move on. And he still says it, even though we're making billions and billions of dollars of profit. He will still say this today. It doesn't quite have the same urgency anymore, but it is a part of the NVIDIA history. Jensen's battle plan: tight schedules, meet schedules, win the OEM battles. This would be the Dells, the Gateways, the PC makers. Every fall, every spring, fastest chip on a tight schedule. I joined September 97 and was about the 65th employee at the time. I showed up on a Monday morning, I remember this. I was told to go down the corridor and pick the first empty office I found. Remember the layoffs. I could scavenge whatever I needed from further down offices that were still empty. I was excited to be there. So here we go, we're up to the graphics wars, the fun stuff. The Riva 128, called the NV3, shipped Q3 97 and did well. It had somewhat suspect graphics quality because it was a stripped-down hot rod. This was a car with no chassis, no brakes, no windshield. It just went straight fast. And it was gloriously fast, in fact. So if you look at this benchmark, this is a magazine, PC Magazine, December 1997. I put a star beside the Riva 128 boards, and you can see that they were the fastest on all these benchmarks. You win benchmarks, the PC OEMs want to ship your card on their PCs, you make money. Winning was everything. When I joined, I was surprised by the lack of a good graphics testing suite. Surprise. And so to help the TNT effort, the next generation chip, I wrote one. It is still in use today, after 27 years. I think I wrote about the first 100 tests, in fact, exploring all aspects of the graphics pipeline. All the modes I could think of, because I could, and there was nobody else doing it. This is part of the fun of working for a small startup. There isn't a testing group particularly. You do what you have to do to make the company successful. You have to be flexible. The follow-on chip, the Riva 128ZX in V3.5, shipped the spring of 98 and faced good competition from Intel, of all companies, with the Intel 740, which was a pretty reasonably good chip. It was a bit late, and that saved our bacon, I suspect. Being late is never a good thing. This was my manager, David Kirk, at the time. And this is a Boot magazine from April 98 lip article where they ham it up in the graphics wars. Now, Dave, when I joined, actually had a card, a business card, that said Minister of Armaments on it. And so they played this up by dressing him up as an army officer or whatever military service it is, and a whole bunch of guns in the background. Because there really were graphics wars going on. There was a lot of companies fighting for every dollar. And it was exciting and frightening at the same time, because you knew that if you screwed up, that would not be you getting money next cycle. Somebody else would take it from you. The graphics wars are now in full swing. Now, some of you who are historians may know some of these companies. 3DFX, very famous, probably the first PC graphics card maker. Back in 96, I think, they had the Voodoo graphics board that was the state-of-the-art in PC graphics. 3D Labs, ATI, the Canadian company from back east, Intel, of course, NVIDIA, Rendition, where I had interviewed, among others. And magazines, this is Boot from 1998, they ran these articles all the time. And the PC manufacturers would submit their PCs, the rankings came out, the winner gets lots of money. It was big, big stuff. You did not want to lose a benchmark. Ruined your business. Here again, a lot of competition in those days. These are all the graphics cards. and it was exciting. I loved these magazines. It was so much fun to read, but what's this company going to put out next? Preview article, and you're going, oh great, are we going to beat them? Are they going to beat us? Yeah, it was fun. The TNT shipped fall 98, very good chip. Great performance and great graphics quality. So here's a review of the twin Texel, the TNT, versus the 3DFX Voodoo Banshee. Now this doesn't happen anymore. You don't go out and go, which of 13 graphics cards should I buy at this price point? I mean, you can buy AMD or NVIDIA, that's all you have to pick from. It's not as exciting anymore. On the strength of the TNT, NVIDIA went IPO on January 22nd, 1999. $12 a share. Market cap, 800 million. I bought a new car to celebrate. This is the quarterly product revenue. So if you look at September 97 when I joined, it's just gone above zero here because we're shipping the Riva 128. It goes up into the next springtime. Here, 98, it dips down because the ZX didn't do as well, and then zooms up based upon the TNT chip. And part of the fun as well was that NVIDIA made graphics chips, not graphics boards. So there were other companies that would buy the chips, package them up on boards, sell them to the PCs, or down at your Best Buy, whatever it was at the time. And there were three major ones. There was Diamond Multimedia, STB, and Creative Labs, I believe. Here we have 3DFX buying one of those. So NVIDIA's losing one of its friends who makes graphics cards based upon our product. Could have been a big problem. Turned out that it really hurt 3DFX to do this. TNT2 followed for the summer 99. That was the spring refresh, and this is actually really important to me. It was really cool that you could buy your own company's cards at the local electronics store. I worked for Silicon Graphics for years. I couldn't afford $250,000 for a graphics workstation for my basement. And it was even cooler when I could buy cards I had designed or helped design. That was really fun. I would wait for the release day, run down and buy my own copy of the card I had helped create. Slam it into my PC and check it out. Now, of course, I had seen the card in the lab during Bring Up, but it was so much fun to have your own copy of it. Then S3 acquires Diamond, one of the three board makers. This is why it says new graphics landscape leaves NVIDIA as last man standing. We've lost two of our three board partners. Is this a big problem? No, it didn't turn out to be. But it was scary at the time. It could have been real trouble for the company. I did not work on the Riva 128. And in case you're curious, Riva stands for Real-Time Interactive Video and Animation Accelerator, or the next generation TNT, Twin Texel. So what was I doing? Well, I started work in December of 1997 after writing some testing stuff on the next generation, what we called NV10, or the GeForce 256. My job was to design the transformer lighting unit. That's what I was hired for, in fact, at NVIDIA. They knew what I had done, and they were interested in designing this type of unit to improve the graphics performance of our graphics chips. Current graphics cards used the CPU for these calculations, which was not fast enough. We were moving much faster than the CPUs were. The goal was to exceed the infinite reality geometry rate, that big mother of a board costing $2,000 in parts, not the retail price. But instead of a large board, it would be a small piece on one chip, one die. It would be much more economical. I knew the code well from my Silicon Graphics days. The main problem was that there were lots of modes of operation, making the code extremely complex to optimize. The usual way of coding, you code a slow path with every option in it, a whole bunch of if-then-else branches all over the place. But those suck performance. You don't want to code performance with a whole bunch of conditional stuff in it. And then you would have specially optimized code for benchmarks or customer requests that ran faster only in certain cases. The transform hardware is floating point, 32-bit. I'll assign Tor for homework to teach you about that stuff. It was mostly multiplication, addition, division, and square root. Division because you divide by the perspective. This causes your foreshortening perspective. And you have to divide by the distance, basically, from the eye to make that look correct. And then the square root because you're normalizing vectors. You divide by the root of the distance squared. The lighting hardware required a bit similar stuff, also a power function because of the cosine to the n of theta for the specular and the diffuse. It says for the specular, sorry. It could be lower precision, though. I'm not going to talk about the lighting unit. It's too much. I don't have time. A little bit about the transform unit. If you've taken math, maybe you've heard about Newton-Raphson. Anybody know what Newton-Raphson is? Nobody? We have a volunteer from the middle. A couple of them, actually. So reciprocal you can do by iterating instead of dividing. And the formula is given here, where A is your input, and xn is the seed you're iterating on. And for floating point, again, homework assignment, you have a sign bit, an exponent, and a mantissa. If you negate a number, the sign bit stays. 1 over a negative number is still negative. The exponent gets negated. If you invert 2 squared, you get 2 to the minus 2. And the lookup table for the mantissa top bits. You just look it up in a small ROM table to get an approximation. So for example, you start with 3. The lookup table gives you an answer of 0.3, for example. You do an iteration 1, it moves up to 0.33. You do this math again, you get 0.3333. And if you do it again, you get 0.33333333, which is more accuracy that you can actually represent. And the accuracy doubles every time you do this. So this is really important for my design. You can also do this for reciprocal square root, and the formula is given down below. This will be a fun homework assignment as well, to design a circuit for this. At some year, I'm not sure what grade level that should be. We can now use multiply and add instead of division and reciprocal square root, which is way better. This is US patent 700-9607, called Method, Apparatus, and Article of Manufacture for a Transfer Module in a Graphics Processor. Lead inventor, somebody called Erik Lindholm. I think I know the guy. So this is the transfer module as proposed in this patent. And it has a multiplying unit, an adder unit, a reciprocal unit, the inverse unit is what the I stands for, and a register file. A little bit of muxing and routing going on in there. And the multiplier is actually a vector. It's 4 wide, x, y, z, w. The addition is as well 4 wide, x, y, z, w. So you have 8 flops plus some special function units in here. It is not particularly complicated looking. It's amazing what you can do with a few multiplies and adds. The really cool thing here is actually, I'll get to that in a second. I talked about that. It is a fixed function unit. And by that, I mean that it really has no programmable code at all. It's not like you download code saying, do a dot product, and then the next piece of instruction says, add a bunch of stuff. There was no code. It was a fixed function unit. It was hardwired to do only what it did. That was the end of it. And it did this in a really, really weird way. It had 60 mode bits that said, turn this on, do this mode there, turn that on, turn that off. You take these bits, a 60-bit vector, and you convert that into a predication vector that matches 1 bit per instruction. And the sequencer would look at this bit vector of 1s and 0s, saying which instructions to execute, and it would only execute the instructions that had a 1. There was no time wasted on 0s. There was no if-then-else, no branching, nothing like that. You could jump over 32 zeros or 64 zeros in this instruction sequence instantly to execute the next instruction. It was incredibly efficient. The transformer lighting engines of the NV1X, that would be the GeForce 256 architecture, to the NV3X, which is up to the FX architecture, was done by 2 people. Erik Lindholm, design, architecture, simulation, and testing. I would write a simulator for my design. It would be bit accurate, it would be cycle accurate, And that's how I developed the actual hardware for this unit. Simon Moy, my old friend, he's my golf partner these days, RTL design and verification. And his method of actually verifying was to inject absolute crap into the unit, random numbers, and see if his output perfectly bit matched what my simulator output for perfect garbage in, perfect garbage out. But if they match between the two, it's not his fault if it doesn't work. It's my fault. The architecture team was small, a handful of people, honestly, at this time. We all had very large responsibilities. So here we go. We're coming into 99, September. The chip is called the NV10. This is, companies tend to have these little managed leaks saying soon we have this wonderful new product coming out and we're going to hint at it. Sorry. Family members. Okay, we're back in business. So it says here, NVIDIA says the main goal of the NV10, this is our baby, is to take on the role of calculating 3D geometry called transformer lighting, or TNL. Now, in the PC graphics space, this has not been done before. So now we're starting to educate people. This is the next thing. It glows bright blue, and you want it. So get ready. So here's another article from December 99, introducing hardware T&L, transformer lighting. So this is my unit, writ large. You can't understand how proud a designer is to see people writing articles about your work, like it's the second coming of graphics. It was really, really flattering. The performance of the NV10 transformer light unit exceeded that of the Infinite Reality from 1996. Geometry board at 1/1000th of the cost. It took less than 4 years to get there. Intel was probably not happy because their CPUs, they wanted to do the transformer lighting, but they couldn't run it that fast. I was negating their marketing efforts, shall we say. Now, you can imagine what SGI was thinking about this time. It wasn't broke yet. If you cost reduce something by a factor of 1,000, their best that they had, they're probably nowhere near catching up to you with their projects. And in fact, SGI wasn't. This is part of the reason SGI went broke. It could not possibly keep up with this pace of advancement. The GeForce 256, that's the NV10. So what you see here is the TNT inside the smaller box. You have, I need my glasses, setup engine, rendering engine, pixel pipes, and the processor for video, HDTV, was added to the GeForce 256. We doubled up the pixel pipes, so it's twice as fast on the pixels, and added a transform engine and a lighting engine. That would be me. This is the GeForce t-shirt, new hardware for the new millennium, because this was the end of 1999. Again, got to get your swag. This is an illustration of how many small triangles are used to build a complex object. More triangles gives a more realistic image. So you want tons and millions of triangles, preferably. So this image is drawn on the right with filled triangles, colored and all the good stuff. On the left in wireframe mode. So this teeny weeny triangles all over the place making up this model. And this was the importance of doing TNL in the chip. You could vastly increase the number of triangles to make objects look much more realistic. No more angled arms or fists with no fingers and all that stuff that people wanted to see. This is a GeForce review card from December 1999. You can see what it looks like here. The chip is the one with the cooler on it, the little fan. And as it says, the Annihilator Pro, this is marketing in action, isn't a video card, it's a weapon of mass destruction. We are still in the video game wars. There are casualties everywhere. So, what does GeForce stand for? I found this cool article from 2002. It says Brian Burke, who I remember, senior PR manager, tells us that GeForce originally stood for geometry force, since it was the first GPU for PCs to calculate the transformer lighting geometry, offloading that function from the CPU. The joke around me was that GeForce stood for geometry by Erik, because they knew what I was doing at the time. So when you see GeForce, think of me as that first D. This is my poster of the GeForce 256. Back in those days, we actually got a poster once in a while of the cool projects we worked on. And as you can see, this is all highlighting lots of geometry. That was the shtick of the GeForce 256. Way more triangles, more realism. On the right here is a memento that the company gave us. It's a picture of the die, a large picture. The thing's about this big, it hangs on my wall. But down here, in this small rectangle at the bottom, is an actual die. That is the GeForce 256 die. And as it says, world's first GPU. So NVIDIA defined the GPU as a single chip processor with integrated transform, lighting, triangle setup clipping, and rendering engines that is capable of processing a minimum of 10 million polygons per second. This was a somewhat self-serving definition, because if you didn't say 10 million, you could argue, well, a CPU can do all this slowly. So it had to be fast, and it had to be in hardware. And as NVIDIA says, even today on its website, if you go and look at the corporate page, the first thing it says is NVIDIA's invention of the GPU in 1999 sparked the growth of the PC gaming market, redefined modern computer graphics, and revolutionized parallel computing. More recently, GPU deep learning ignited modern AI. So if NVIDIA invented the GPU in 1999, I can claim that I invented the GPU in 1999 by this definition. This is an article from last month. Strangely enough, we're in 2024. You subtract 1999, you get 25 years ago. So, 25th anniversary of the release of the GeForce 256. We celebrate a gaming breakthrough that transformed entertainment and laid the foundation for an AI-driven future. It says here, would go on to lay the foundation for today's generative AI. The GeForce 256 wasn't just another graphics card. It was introduced as the world's first GPU, setting the stage for future advancements in both gaming and computing. With hardware transformer lighting, it took the load off the CPU, a pivotal advancement. And by 2011, AI researchers had discovered NVIDIA GPUs and their ability to handle deep learning's immense processing needs. So it laid the bedrock for a future where gaming, computing, and AI are not just evolving together, they're transforming the world. This is NVIDIA's own release in the company language. I'm not going to argue. This is, I think, in New York. As you can see, NVIDIA is very proud of the GeForce 256. So, actually, how am I doing for time? 16 hour, and we're doing okay, good. The GeForce 256 kicked butt. It was fast. 3DFX folded at the end of 2000. Actually, we absorbed some of their assets and engineers at the time, leaving just two graphics vendors, NVIDIA and ATI. The relentless pace left a trail of dead companies in its wake. And that's true. All those companies were gone at this point in time. Jensen's pace of fall, spring, doubling performance every 6 months or whatever it was, they had no way to keep up with this. We had excellent engineers, and they were trying to learn 3D. They had never done it before. It wasn't a fair fight. Next up was the NV20, what you would call the GeForce 3. My job was to make the transform engine into a user-programmable unit. So the initial design of the 10, of course, was a fixed function, no control. It did what it did. You couldn't do anything else with it. The reason was that game developers liked having a look to their games. And they were concerned that if everybody used the same fixed function transformer lighting support, the same modes, all their games would look the same and they couldn't stand out with something unique, a special look. On my side, it was a pain to add tweaks to my unit. I had to modify the sequencer, add the instructions, talk to my hardware guy. It was not pleasant at all. And I did this at SGI as well. Sometimes big companies would come and say, we want a special mode in your graphics pipeline. And you'd code it up and you have to test it. It would take months of work usually to do this. So there was a better way if they could just do it themselves. But nobody had ever done it. Unfortunately, I don't know why it was never done. It would be an interesting thought unto itself. So the fixed function TNL block of the NV10 had over 1 quintillion modes of operation. If you look at all the bits controlling all the possible code sequences, you can imagine trying to modify that. It wasn't fun. We wanted performance and we wanted flexibility. So, because time is short, Jensen has tight schedules, you start with what you know, the NV10 TNL unit. I fleshed out the sharp corners, made it much more, because the NV10 was highly, highly minimized. It was just the absolute minimum that would do the job. There was no room for any fat. So you make it more flexible, simple to program, and bingo, vertex shaders were born. This is a very high-level diagram. There's more stuff inside these blocks, but fundamentally, it's a function unit, does multiplies and adds, inverses, and a register file, R down below, input buffer and output buffer. Now, there's a lot of stuff in this, but it's not a particularly complicated design. Instructions, multiply, add, minimums, maximums, set-ons, reciprocal square root, 4-term and 3-term dot products, log and exp in base 2 because it's easier. As you will discover, floating point logarithms are pretty nice because they're really exponent times mantissa, and of course multiplies become adds once you do a log. Exp was interesting, there was a lighting function, but this is the instruction set that we exposed to people to code their own, whatever they wanted. The design was presented at SIGGRAPH 2001? Yeah, it was 2001. Boy, it's been a long time. And seems to have done well. So SIGGRAPH was the computer graphics hardware conference back in those days. If it was interesting and important, it was at SIGGRAPH. The design was incorporated into Microsoft's DX8, and it took a surprising amount of work for such a conceptually simple idea. This is something I believe is very important. People have been skeptical about it. Good design should be aesthetic. It should feel right, it should smell right, it should be right. If you think it's a bit ugly in the corners, you're doing something wrong. It has inner beauty, if you like. And you'll discover this in your careers, that some things just feel right. You know when it's good, and you know when it's not good. So I got a whole bunch of citations on that paper, and this is Lindholm, that's me, architecture, Kilgard, who was the OpenGL driver software guy, and Henry Morton, who is one of those really old-timer Silicon Graphics people who moved to NVIDIA over the years as well. The design was carried over into the NV25, NV2A, which was the Xbox. The first Xbox design was called the NV2A graphics chip, with some modifications. I'm not going to bother talking about them. So, February 2001, John Carmack, who some of you might remember or know, he's still famous today. He did Doom and Quake back in the old days. And his comments are, Vertex programs are probably the most radical new feature, and unlike most radical new features, actually turn out to be pretty damn good. The instruction language is clear and obvious, with wonderful features like free arbitrary swizzle and negate on each operand, and obvious things you want for graphics like dot product instructions. The Vertex program instructions are what SSE should have been. Now, SSE is Intel's streaming SIMD extensions, introduced 1999, for doing 3D transform. So again, Intel is probably not very happy with me again. GeForce 3, into the articles we go. This is from April 2001. As they say, completely reinvents visuals in 3D games. That this is fun. You can't imagine what it's like to slave away on a project for a year and a half, and then it goes out and people love it. It's career building. It gives you a lot of confidence. And you will discover in your careers that the more confident you are, the better job you will do. If you're just worried about how to get something done, and you don't know how to get something done, and you're scared of it, you're not going to do a good job. Learn to have confidence in yourself. It makes a huge difference. It doesn't mean you know how to solve the problem. It's just that you believe that you will solve the problem by working hard at it. Another article, this is from April 2001. At the heart of a lot of this new tech power is technology NVIDIA calls its Infinite FX engine. Marketing is everywhere in these days. Everything's got to have a cool name. And it's the world's first consumer-level programmable GPU. SGI, Silicon Graphics, never went here. They could have, but I don't know why. Now this is 3D gaming. So things are moving fast. I mean, you're looking at 2001, so it's been 4 years at this time since I joined NVIDIA. In that time, we've shipped Riva 128, 28ZX, TNT, TNT2, GeForce, and soon to be the GeForce 2, and now the GeForce 3. It's no fun trying to keep up with NVIDIA. Believe me, we were working our asses off the whole time, and we knew what we were doing. So I worked on the NV30 pixel shader instruction set. This is for generating pretty pixels in the triangles. But I did not work on the NV40 architecture. By the end of 2006, the GeForce 7900, this is a 4x derivative, had 24 pixel shaders and 8 vertex shader units. So we've gone from the old days where, like the GeForce 256, you had 1 vertex unit and 4 pixels. Now we're up to 8 vertex and 24 pixels. Performance is moving up quickly, but this is a problem with load balancing. Large triangles would have a lot of pixels, keeps the pixel engines really busy, but your vertex engines are waiting for your pixels. There's a lot of pixels to process. A large triangle takes time. And conversely, if you have teeny-weeny triangles, the vertex units are screaming in pain, and the pixel units are going, not getting many pixels down here. This is not an efficient way to do graphics. And we knew this. It was obvious what was going to happen. We saw it coming. It was time to design a unified shader architecture. So instead of having 2 programmable units, pixel and vertex, with their own unique teams, people working on them, didn't share much of anything, we would combine them into one super unit that could do either one as it saw fit. I started work on the NV50 in the summer of 2002. And for the benefit of people here, I actually started in Kitsilano working on this because I was on vacation. Well, I was a working vacation. It wasn't a vacation. I liked coming back. I spent many years in Vancouver, and I love coming back to Vancouver. I still come back a fair amount to Vancouver. I was the first and only architect at the time doing this. I did the initial thinking about this product. I spent the fall helping out with NV40 because when crunch time comes, you do whatever you got to do for the good of the company. There's more important things. And my view was I couldn't wait to start designing the fastest TNL engine ever. This was like a kid in a candy store. I could do it my way. I'm not going to sing because I'm a terrible singer. So a unified shader architecture allows execution units to work on vertices or pixels or primitives or whatever else you want, including compute, for those of you who have done some AI work. The initial design work, well, you sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper, that's what I did, and decided, okay, great, how's this thing going to work? Nobody's thought about it before. And I knew that pixels like being in 2x2 quads. It's for derivative reasons. You can subtract pixel values and get slopes, and that's really important for texture filtering. And vertices are just loners. They don't share much. So you can pack 4 vertices or 4 pixels into a unit of work and make the hardware run on that. But I wanted to run wider because it's more efficient. I want to amortize the control logic that runs all this stuff. Talked to Simon, my hardware guy, and he said, well, 12 wide. That's pretty efficient. You're amortizing the control over 12 pieces of work. Now, engineers don't like the number 12, so we rounded up to 16. Powers of 2 are cool for us. So the initial packing was 16 vertices wide, or 4 quads, or 16 pixels wide. And this later evolved into what we call the warp today. Another huge problem was how to schedule the work. Great, you got a bunch of pixels, you get a bunch of vertices. How do you schedule this thing? And I can't even explain how much time I spent on scheduling this beast. I like the idea of being able to hide texture latency. You have to go off chip usually. It can be hundreds of cycles of waiting time for a return, like a load. And so I mixed them. That way, anything can hide latency for anything else. Seemed like a good way to do things. I went back to NV50 at the end of 2002, and the group started to assemble into the spring. There were discussions with Sony about the PlayStation 3 then. Regarding the PlayStation 3, for a while, the PS3 had no GPU. It was going to run everything with the SPUs, which was their little programming unit. And the ICE team, which I don't even know what that is right now, proved to Japan that it was just impossible. It would be ridiculous. Performance-wise, it would be a disaster. That's why they finally added a GPU closer to the end. This is from IG.com in 2013, from somebody who was there on the developer side, I guess. Sony finally decided to go with an NV47 derivative for the GPU. It shipped at the end of 2006. I had nothing to do with it. But if you care about a bit of history about gaming consoles, it's a cool little point. The NV50, which also was called G80, don't ask me why, even I don't remember. We used to change code names all the time, ran out of digits, I don't know what it is. It was an amazing, stunning amount of work. I spent years working on this part, the SM, the streaming multiprocessor, mostly on the instruction set definition, the data paths, how to execute all the work, and scheduling this beast. What I enjoyed most was throwing out the old pixel pipeline and combiners. I'm a vertex guy. I don't care much for pixels, honestly. And the old pixel pipeline was rather straight-jacketed and old-fashioned. Chuck the whole thing out. You know, it's funny, I look back on this now and I go, what the hell was I thinking? If this hadn't worked, it would have been a disaster. This was a huge change in how the graphics chip internally functioned. So, but I'm a TNL guy, so the TL engine was my forward path. Another key contributor was John Nichols, who designed CUDA. And he deserves an amazing amount of I don't know, praise/remembrance, because CUDA today is the root of the AI work that all the companies are doing. And if you don't know about CUDA, I suggest you find an article on Wiki and read up on it, because I think you will all be doing some amount of AI homework before you graduate, and odds are you will use CUDA to do so. It was he who named the SM, the streaming multiprocessor. Actually, my director was after me for weeks to name these units, because they had no name back then. It was just, you know, the processing engine. And I kept on telling him basically to go drop dead, because I was busy working on this thing. He finally gave up, went to John, and John named everything. So the SM is his, the SP is his, the warp is his name as well, in case you're curious. Did a pretty good job with the naming. I'm happy with it. The NV50 was very different from what had been built before, and it laid the foundations of the current AI boom. The 256 was a cool thing with TNL, but it was not flexible or programmable. It was just fast, but it laid the roots of the NV50, and the NV50 design here is by far the most important architecture that I think anybody has built in the 2000s. So I feel it's the most important chip of the 21st century. It deserves a lot of recognition. It was the first massively multi-threaded supercomputer on a chip. Yeah, it did graphics, but the processing units, the SM, for example, didn't really care what it did. It could do any kind of work. It just wanted, if you were doing triangles or pixels, then they're part of the graphics pipeline. But it could do other things as well, like running compute with CUDA. So it had over 12,000 threads in one chip. Now, Intel is very happy about their 24 cores, I think, these days, running 24 threads. We ran 12,000 threads in 18 years ago. We're in, I think, the hundreds of thousands of threads today. So when I talk about scheduling the beast, I really meant it. It was frightening dealing with an anthill, which it really was, and trying to keep it all coordinated as much as possible. It was actually amazingly scary. And this has happened a few times in my career. If you go back to the GeForce 256, it was my first unit design. At SGI, I was kind of a middle-range engineer. I didn't do the initial design work and all the good stuff. I kicked in later in the process. This was my baby, the GeForce 256. And you have no idea how scary it is to be responsible for a unit on a chip by yourself. And when it came back from the fab, both Simon and I, we would go to the lab every day, and we would ask, have you tested it yet? And the lab kept on saying, nope, because they were bringing up all the other circuits on the chip first, not the T and L block. And we did this for days. We're scared stiff that this thing is a dud. You know, it's a piece of turd on the die that doesn't do anything useful. And then we came in one day and said, have you tested it yet? Yes, it just worked. You can't imagine what you feel like at that moment, that the first real challenge of your career actually works. Because this is not a safety net company. You could have easily screwed something up, and nobody would have known. There's nobody to catch your fall. You're on your own. Small company, startup, basically. So you can't imagine how good that felt. That's when you bring out a keg of beer and you drink yourself just absolutely into bliss. If you care about the architecture, there's a great article on the NV50, the GeForce 8800 GTX, by Lindholm Nichols, who I've introduced, Stuart Oberman, a great hardware engineer, and John Montram, who actually interviewed me at Silicon Graphics back in 1989, and he is still with NVIDIA today. I have worked with him my whole career in California. He's a great guy. So this is NVIDIA Tesla, a unified graphics and computing architecture. So this is the root, I consider, of the AI processing, the original design. This is what it looks like. I could spend probably hours describing the fine, cool stuff about it. But basically, it's a recirculation engine. You input a type of work A, you crunch it out, spit it out at the back end. It moves back to the top as type work B. You process that through the units, and then goes back out, maybe comes back as type unit C. You kick it into the units, and you process it, and you spit it out maybe into the triangle setup, and you draw pixels on the screen. As a result, you're mixing a whole bunch of different kinds of work with these 12,000 threads. And as I said, scheduling this beast was a fascinating job. And it was one of those things where nobody, including me, especially me because I was dealing with it, I was scared. It could have come back and run like a dog. Everything could have gone wrong. You know, it's cool doing this stuff, but it's really scary sometimes. NV50, so here we go. We're into December 2006. NVIDIA claims that a single 8800 GTX is faster than two 7900 GTX running in SLI. SLI stands for scan line interleave. It's a way of running two chips as one card to double your performance. So we doubled the previous high-end performance card we had. NV50 surprised and crushed the competition. They never recovered. NVIDIA is still using this basic architecture. And it paved the way for the AI boom that started in 2012 with AlexNet winning the ImageNet competition using the GeForce 580 GTX. And if you haven't read about the 2012 ImageNet competition, I strongly suggest you do so. It is history. Here's an article again on the NVIDIA GeForce 8800. Again, it's so cool to see your work in articles. You know, yeah, it's a magazine for geeks and nerds maybe, or video gamer, but man, that's what I was as well, so I was really happy about this. In 2006, AMD acquired ATI. NVIDIA is the last one standing. Out of all those companies I started with NVIDIA's history, we were the only ones left now. Intel, of course, attends a new graphics effort every 10 years, puts out a lot of fancy press releases saying we're going to crush everybody, and then quietly folds up and never delivers anything useful. It's just, I don't know why, but they bother, honestly. I left GPU Architecture Group in the fall of 2013 and joined NVIDIA Research. The GPU group had gotten too large. It was fun when it was a small growing company. I had lots of responsibility and tons of control over what I did. I was a one-man force almost. But now the company was much larger. There were teams everywhere. I was part of a group, and I didn't really enjoy it all that much. I was unhappy with the slow rate of change. Because we had a great architecture, there wasn't a need to start over from the scratch again and build another one. It worked great. Peacetime was boring. I assisted the ray tracing effort, the RTX, as we call them today. I was not the originator of that design, just to be clear about that, but I had lots of experience with GPU architecture because I worked in GPU architecture for so long, and they wanted advice on how to incorporate their design as painlessly as possible into the GPU architectures that I was used to. Since then, I spent a lot of time thinking about work creation and queuing systems for much more flexible processing. My career has been about making things more flexible, more programmable. It's not finished yet. There is one more step I feel that needs to be done, and I've been pursuing this at NVIDIA Research for many years. I did not get involved in the AI effort. I almost killed myself surviving the graphics wars. You have no idea how much work it was back in those days. It was frightening. Never again, and I mean that. I have no idea how Jensen does it. He is untiring, never quits, always surviving and surprising in what he can accomplish. He is a true visionary, and I've been around him for a long time. It's a very, very true statement. He is. Here is the discrete, this is GPU card, market share over the years, because NVIDIA versus AMD, because nobody else matters. NV50 comes out here. So the red is AMD, the green is NVIDIA. Things were tough here, you'll notice, a lot of competition. NV50 comes out here, and then you follow the trend on market share. And then it overlaps and starts here on the years, and it keeps on going up to here. This is where we are close to today. NVIDIA has over 88% market share compared to AMD with 12%, I think. And I put this in because it's a cool little chart. Again, this really is Jensen's story. It's not mine. But NVIDIA employee count, you'll notice. So I joined, let's see, here 2000. I joined like here, 97. It shows to be 0, I think, on this graph. And you can see how the employee count has grown, hits the inflection point of AI here, and now is growing even faster. So in my time, we've gone from 65-odd employees to over 30,000 employees today. I don't know anybody in the company anymore. Yeah, there's a few of us old fogies around, but a lot of young people. And they're working their asses off now as I'm doddering off into retirement soon, I think. NVIDIA is now the most valuable public company in the world. And it's gotten so valuable these days, $3.5 trillion US dollars, that all the history between 1990, whatever it is, 98, maybe 99, up to 2015 rounds to zero, which is really sad because there's a lot of history in all those quarters. New chip comes out, great quarter. Competition comes out with a great chip, bad quarter. And there's a lot of memories that I can't even see on this graph because it's, again, the AI boom has exploded the value of NVIDIA. Here I am with my patent cubes. I have over 128 patents. Of course, they're NVIDIA's patents, but I authored them. And I have cubes for over half of them. For a long time, I had the most patents of any NVIDIA employee. Currently, I don't know. I haven't asked. But I'm still probably way up there. This was for an article inside of NVIDIA celebrating patent people. And this is my Master Inventor Award back in 2008 from Jensen. So this is when I got that title of NVIDIA Master Inventor because of my patent contributions to the company. In 2016, I received the UBC Dean's Medal of Distinction. It was nice to be publicly recognized for my work, and I really appreciate it from UBC. And I'm wearing it here. Health warning. 40 years of software has damaged my neck. That's why I don't like to bend my neck a lot left to right. I tend to move my shoulders a lot more than my neck, you'll find. Please be careful about posture when working. Your body will thank you later. It didn't bother me for many decades, but it has caught up with me. So, for your own good, listen. Summary. I made some decisions that placed me right in the middle of the PC graphics wars between 1997 and 2007. I was the right person. I loved what I was doing. You can't imagine how much enjoyment I had out of all this. At the right place, that would be California, which I got there through Japan, strangely enough, at the right time. And the right time has to do a little bit with the fact that I worked on the high-end iron and the big systems. I learned the systems. And then it exploded into the main space, the commodity space. And I was trained, I was ready, and I found my place working on this. Back at UBC as a student, I would never have thought it. You know, it's been a fascinating career. So my advice to you, take some chances with your career. Don't think small. Changing the world is extremely hard work. If you want to do this kind of work, work-life balance, not so much. You're going to have to pick a little bit on that. If you want a 9-to-5 job, don't get involved in anything like a startup. They're not going to appreciate you very much. And confidence comes from achievement. I was not confident when I started my career. I was a student. I took exams. I don't know about work or designing anything on my own. So if you're worried about what you can and cannot accomplish as students, basically by solving problems in the real world and making a difference for your company, hopefully, you will gain the confidence. And once you have a bit of confidence, there's nothing you can't do. Most of engineering is actually learning how to disassemble a large problem into small pieces and tackling it piece by piece and assembling a solution at the end of it. Don't think that a huge problem is unsolvable. And above all, don't panic. You will be given tasks in your career that you're absolutely clueless on how to solve. It's fine to ask for help. There are senior people around you. You will become one, hopefully one day yourself. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions? Yeah?
So you said that you needed to get your master's to do research in Japan, but in general, how essential would you say the knowledge you gained in your master's was for your journey compared to your undergrad?
I would say neither one was particularly technically useful. Mind you, I did a lot of software on part of my master's thesis, more than my undergraduate, which was useful, of course. but it opened the door because it was a master's, and the minimum requirement to be a visiting researcher was a master's degree. Also, it was a great place to wait out a bad employment time, so I wasn't complaining. But in terms of the usefulness of my coursework, a little bit. I did take a graphics course because I loved graphics even back then, which I didn't take in my undergrad. It helped a little bit. But the key was just having a master's. It opens doors, and if you want to work in California later, a master's degree is a lot more impressive than a bachelor's. And a PhD, there is NVIDIA research. I'm probably one of the few people in NVIDIA research who does not have a PhD. There's a ton of PhDs in the group. What I have is tons of experience and success. That's why I had no problems getting into NVIDIA research, but I'm not a doctorate. So I think to be an engineer, a PhD is overkill. It might take too many years out of your life earning your degree, and you might be too specialized by that time. On the other hand, I also feel that the work I was doing back then was way more difficult than a PhD. So if a PhD came up and said, yeah, I majored in computer graphics in my thesis, I would pick him to pieces. He wouldn't have a chance. I'm working on the fastest, newest stuff in the world, and he's studying under some professor with 10-year-old knowledge. You know, I'm sure Tor appreciates the lack of information he's gotten over the years from NVIDIA and other graphics companies. We don't talk much about what we do. It's kind of hush-hush. We're too busy to educate. We don't care that much. We just want to sell chips.
Any other questions? We should probably repeat the question for anybody watching the video.
How about you repeat the question?
Okay. Any other question? In the middle there?
Can you talk about how the IP works? Did you ever feel, especially when you moved from SGI to NVIDIA, that you knew how to do things, but there was past NDAs and IP agreements where you were sort of muzzled? Or was it developing so fast that never happened?
Okay. Briefly, the question's about IP and I guess when moving between companies.
Yeah, you have to be careful. But honestly, NVIDIA was moving so fast and having such a specialized offering compared to SGI that, yeah, okay, I mean, the software is not patentable. The OpenGL API is not patentable. The only thing I would have to be careful about is replicating an SGI hardware design at NVIDIA, and that was never even close. They were building these massive boards, and here I am building this teeny-weeny unit. The design space was so different that there was no concern about it. It was, like I said, it was a factor of 1,000. It doesn't have overlap at that point. It's so different. But in general, for other people who come from other companies, yes, the company needs to be careful and the employees need to be careful about this. There's always threats from other companies, especially if they feel pressured by your product to, do something legal about it, and I do not like lawyers. I had been involved in a number of patent lawsuits over the years. I hated every minute of it. So the last thing, and I was warned about this a long time ago, you do not want to go in front of a lawyer giving a deposition. It is just not fun at all. So don't get involved. Don't risk it. Be safe.
Question over there? Yep.
Yeah. So you said a lot about being like the right person at the right time. And when did you realize that you were on the right path? And the last thing is, what kind of mindset were you in to find like the right path? Because it can't all be just up to luck, right?
So the question about being the right person at the right time and on the right path.
Well, that's an interesting question. Clearly, when I was working at Silicon Graphics, that was the only path I knew. It was my training ground for what I was learning. When I went to NVIDIA, and also I remember at SGI, I was not senior designer. I was programming other people's work mostly, which was educational, but I wasn't creating the hardware at that point in time. At NVIDIA, given my own unit design, and the frightfulness of that task, in fact, I think when the chip came back in 99, let's say, and it worked, and it worked really well, I started to realize that this was a really cool design. It was something special. You know, I broke the curve, you know, factor of 1,000 and all that. And that's when you start to realize that you can actually contribute something unique. And that's when I gained the confidence, actually, to continue doing that. So if you like, that is the right path. When you've done something successful that nobody else could do, you feel at least, nobody else has done at this point, that clearly you must be doing something right. And the only thing you can do at that point is double your speed and keep running. Otherwise, they'll catch up to you. And they'll define the right way, perhaps, after you. So, yeah, the right path, it comes more in hindsight, honestly, when you sit back, relax over a nice cold beer and go, yeah, that was really cool with the old friends, or perhaps making a slide set like this up. It's quite emotional, actually, going back and reviewing these days. And I'm very proud of what I've done. And so I can look back and say, yes, it was obviously the right path. At the time, did I know? Hell no. I was too busy trying to crank it out. Was the second part question?
It was like, what was the mindset that you put yourself into, I guess, go down this path?
You mean at NVIDIA designing this kind of stuff, or which path?
Well, like the journey that you took through all these design graphics technology.
I guess I was stupid, actually. I didn't realize how difficult it was. I don't know. I was too busy to worry about it at the time. I think when I was designing the GeForce 3, the vertex shader programmable unit, is when, and I actually had a publication at the conference about it, that it was a big deal. And I think at that time, I started to feel that, yeah, there was a path here, and I was really good at it, which I didn't know, of course, when I started work at NVIDIA. So it kind of grew on me slowly with success, chip after chip. And looking back, it's easy to say, but at the time, it was just a panic. You know, short schedules, and how to get it done, and all these demands everywhere. No, there was no insight at that time. It comes after. When the historians get at you, that they claim these things about the right path.
Okay, I think we'll do one more question, so we have some time to maybe socialize with Erik afterwards. So the person in the middle had their hand up the longest, I think.
In terms of the ontology and in terms of your emotional description, it sounded like scheduling the stream processor was probably the largest challenge, potentially the most consequential one, just in terms of the basic infrastructure.
Yeah.
And you described this managing an anthill. Is there something that we can learn more generally than, let's say, graphics processors? Some deeper structural universal insights you had about how to schedule them. In terms, it seems like there's something that was not learned by the industry.
Detailed technical question.
Yeah. You want to repeat the question briefly, or shall I? I can say it. So the question is about scheduling the NV50, these 12,000 odd threads. Again, it was scary. I had a simulator. Again, I write a lot of simulators for my work, and it gives me insight into the design. I can see how it behaves, and if it's a good, well-written simulator, it's pretty accurate. And so you can see your problems, you can see the hiccups, you can see when it starves itself because of something you've done wrong. You would not like how I debugged the scheduling. What I would do is put a lot of printfs. Remember, this is a very wide architecture, and I would wade through 10 million line output files, giving all these statistics of what's going on inside this baby. And I would look through it and go, this doesn't look good. What caused that? And I would rewind the file to figure out, okay, because this happened, because that happened, because that happened. Maybe I should modify the schedule a little bit because of this. This is not a breakpoint problem. You have to find the problem, and then you have to walk backwards in time to figure out what caused that problem. So the most important tool I had was my simulator. And like I said, I spent a lot of time on that simulator, wading through massive output files to figure out what I liked and disliked about what was happening. It was not a foresight kind of design. It was, okay, kick it off, let's see what it does. I think I have a couple of good ideas. I'll implement them, and I'll see what happens, and then go back, fix it, go back, fix it, and try and tame the beast enough that you almost believed in it. And you hoped for the best when the chip comes back, that your simulator was accurate enough and it's behaving the way you hoped it would. That doesn't mean it works perfectly. Of course not. You will never, ever have a perfect design. But you got to get close enough that it's respectable. So again, a good simulator is your friend. And I happen to like writing simulators. Every design, I write a new one. And then, of course, later on, there may be an official company simulator done by a proper testing person or something, but that's years later. I have to develop it now. I can't wait that long. So write good code and understand your own design.
Great. Let's thank Erik again, and then afterwards, feel free to stick around as long as we have the room. I don't know if there's another class coming in, but we have it for at least 10 more minutes, so you can go up and meet Erik. Okay, thanks.
That made us go.
I don't know, actually. Maybe I'll take this thing off at this point. I would hope so. It's probably gold-plated, but it's magnetic, so it can't be solid.